What would you do if a struggling elderly person couldn't afford their medication? Would you turn them away, or would you help them, even if it meant breaking the rules? This is the story of Marcus Chen, a pharmaceutical billionaire who disguised himself to find out what kind of people were really working behind the counters of his pharmacies. What he discovered that day would change everything. Marcus Chen stood in the executive boardroom of Chen Pharmaceuticals, staring at the quarterly reports with growing concern. His company owned over 200 pharmacy locations across the country, generating billions in revenue each year. But lately, something had been bothering him. Customer satisfaction scores were dropping, and online reviews told stories of cold, indifferent staff who seemed more interested in profits than people. Marcus had built his empire on the principle that healthcare should be accessible and compassionate, but he wondered if that vision had been lost somewhere along the way. At 62 years old, Marcus had seen it all in the pharmaceutical industry. He'd started as a pharmacy technician himself, working nights to put himself through business school. He remembered the faces of customers who couldn't afford their insulin, the parents choosing between groceries and antibiotics for their sick children. Those memories had driven him to create a company that was different, that cared. But success had distanced him from the front lines, and he feared his original mission had been forgotten. That evening, Marcus made a decision that would surprise even his closest advisors. He called his chief of operations and told her he was taking a personal leave for 2 weeks. No one would know where he was or what he was doing. Then he contacted a professional makeup artist who worked in film production. Within hours, he was sitting in a chair being transformed. Prosthetic wrinkles were carefully applied to his face, age spots dotted his hands, and a grey wig replaced his dark hair. Contact lenses clouded his sharp eyes. The transformation was remarkable. Looking in the mirror, Marcus barely recognized himself. Gone was the confident billionaire in designer suits. In his place stood Harold Thompson, an 80-year-old man with a slight stoop and weathered hands that trembled just enough to seem authentic. Marcus practiced shuffling his walk, softening his voice to a raspy whisper, and adopting the mannerisms of someone who had lived a long, hard life. He wanted every detail to be perfect. Marcus chose his target location carefully. Meadowbrook Pharmacy sat in a working-class neighborhood where many customers struggled to make ends meet. The online reviews for this location were particularly troubling. Some praised the staff as angels, while others complained about being treated like numbers in a system that didn't care. Marcus wanted to see the truth for himself. He wanted to know if his employees would show compassion when they thought no one important was watching. He dressed in worn clothing purchased from a thrift store. The jacket had seen better days, the shoes were scuffed and old, and the pants hung loosely on his frame thanks to padding that made him appear frail. In his pocket, he carried an expired insurance card and barely enough cash to cover one prescription. Everything about Harold Thompson screamed vulnerability, desperation, and poverty. It was the perfect test. As Marcus drove his rental car to Meadowbrook Pharmacy, his heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety. What would he find? Would his employees uphold the values he'd built his company on? Or had corporate pressure and bureaucracy crushed the humanity out of the system? He parked in the lot, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The automatic doors whooshed open, and Harold Thompson entered the pharmacy. The store was busy with the usual morning rush. Customers lined up at the counter, some impatiently checking their phones, others chatting with neighbors. Behind the counter, 3 pharmacy staff members worked efficiently, filling prescriptions and answering questions. Marcus observed them carefully, noting their interactions. Most were polite but rushed, focused on moving the line quickly. Then his eyes landed on the young woman at the far register. Her name tag read, Sarah Martinez. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that reached everyone she served. Even from a distance, Marcus noticed something different about her. She took an extra moment with each customer, making eye contact, asking how they were feeling. When an elderly woman struggled to open a medication bottle, Sarah didn't just hand her the pills. She patiently demonstrated the proper technique and made sure the woman understood the dosage instructions. This was exactly the kind of employee Marcus had hoped to find, but he needed to test her further. Marcus joined the line, shuffling forward slowly with his shoulders hunched. His hands shook slightly as he clutched a crumpled prescription paper. Other customers glanced at him with a mixture of sympathy and impatience. One man behind him sighed loudly, clearly annoyed by Harold's slow pace. But Marcus stayed in character, playing the role of a forgotten old man who had nowhere else to turn. When he finally reached Sarah's counter, their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of human connection that money couldn't buy. Sarah's smile was genuine as she greeted the elderly man before her. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" Her voice carried warmth that seemed rare in the busy pharmacy environment. Marcus handed her the prescription with trembling hands, making sure to fumble slightly as Harold would. The paper was for multiple medications: heart medication, blood pressure pills, and insulin. These were expensive drugs, the kind that bankrupted people on fixed incomes every single day. Sarah took the prescription gently and began entering the information into the computer system. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, but her expression changed as she read the details. Marcus watched her carefully, noting every micro-expression that crossed her face. She glanced up at him, then back at the screen, her brow furrowing slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm processing this now. Do you have insurance information I can use?" Her tone remained kind, but Marcus could hear the concern beginning to creep in. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the expired insurance card, his hands shaking more dramatically now. He placed it on the counter and said in his practiced, raspy voice, "This is all I have, miss. I hope it still works." Sarah picked up the card and examined it, then typed the information into her system. After a few moments, she shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but this insurance expired 3 months ago. Do you have current coverage or another card?" The other customers in line were getting restless. A woman 2 people back checked her watch impatiently. A young man scrolled through his phone, sighing loudly, but Sarah didn't rush. She waited patiently for Harold's response, her eyes full of concern rather than judgment. Marcus felt a surge of hope. This was already different from what he'd feared, but the real test was still coming. He needed to push further. I don't have anything else," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "I thought I had until next month. Medicare, you know. It's all so confusing." He let his shoulders sag, embodying the defeat that so many real customers must feel in this exact situation. Sarah's expression softened even more. She typed something else into the computer, clearly trying to find a solution. The total appeared on her screen, and Marcus saw her face pale slightly. "The total for all 3 medications without insurance is $847.32, Sarah said quietly, leaning closer so the other customers wouldn't hear the amount. It was a gesture of dignity, protecting Harold's privacy in a moment of vulnerability. "Is that something you can manage today, or would you like me to see if there are any discount programs available?" Her professionalism remained intact, but Marcus could see genuine concern in her eyes. This wasn't just a transaction to her, this was a person in need. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn wallet. His hands shook more noticeably now as he opened it, revealing only $53 in crumpled bills. He counted the money slowly on the counter, his fingers trembling. "This is all I have until my Social Security check comes next week," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need these medications. My doctor said they're important. What can I get with this?" The desperation in his voice was calculated, but based on real stories he'd heard countless times. Sarah stared at the money on the counter, then back at her computer screen. Marcus watched as she bit her lip, clearly struggling with something. The pharmacy manager was visible in the back office, working on paperwork. Company policy was clear: no medications without payment, But Sarah wasn't looking at the policy manual. She was looking at the elderly man before her who couldn't afford to stay alive. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for, the moment that would reveal her true character. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said carefully, "let me see what I can do. Can you give me just a few minutes?" She didn't wait for approval before picking up the phone. Marcus watched as she called someone, speaking in hushed tones. She referenced patient assistance programs, manufacturer coupons, and discount cards. She spent nearly 10 minutes on that call while the line behind Marcus grew longer. Other staff members gestured for customers to come to their registers, but Sarah stayed focused on solving Harold's problem. The pharmacy manager noticed the holdup and walked over to Sarah's station. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone businesslike and slightly impatient. He glanced at the line of waiting customers, clearly concerned about efficiency metrics. Sarah looked up at him, and Marcus saw determination flash in her eyes. "I'm working on getting Mr. Thompson's medications covered," she explained. "He needs all three, and I'm finding assistance programs for him. It'll just take a few more minutes." The manager's expression tightened. "Sarah, we've talked about this. We can't hold up the line for every customer who can't pay. Process what he can afford and move on." His words were harsh, but unfortunately reflected the reality of many corporate environments where numbers mattered more than people. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he remained in character, looking down at his feet in shame. This was exactly the kind of attitude he'd feared had infected his company. But Sarah didn't back down. "Sir, with respect, this man needs his heart medication and insulin. These aren't optional. I found a manufacturer's coupon that brings the insulin down to 35s, and I'm checking on the others now. I just need a few more minutes." Her voice was firm but respectful, walking the line between obedience and advocacy. The manager hesitated, glanced at Marcus, then at the growing line. Finally, he sighed. "5 minutes, Sarah. That's it." He walked away, shaking his head. Sarah turned back to her computer with renewed determination. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she searched databases that Marcus didn't even know his pharmacies had access to. She found manufacturer discount programs, pharmacy savings cards, and patient assistance applications. Each discovery brought the total down incrementally. She was fighting for Harold Thompson the way a warrior fights for a cause they believe in, and Marcus felt something stirring in his chest, pride mixed with guilt. After 15 minutes of intense focus, Sarah finally looked up with a small smile. "Okay, Mr. Thompson, here's what I've managed to do. I found a manufacturer's coupon for your insulin that brings it down to $35. For your heart medication, there's a generic version that costs $12 instead of $300. And for your blood pressure medication, I enrolled you in our pharmacy discount program, which brings it to $8. The new total is $55. She paused, then added quietly, "I know that's still $2 more than you have." Marcus looked at the money on the counter, then at Sarah's compassionate face. He played his role perfectly, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I don't know what to say. You've done so much already. Maybe I can just take the heart medication and wait on the others." It was the kind of impossible choice that thousands of Americans faced every day, and hearing himself say it out loud made Marcus's blood boil at the injustice of it all. "No," Sarah said firmly. "You need all three medications. Your health depends on it." She glanced around quickly, making sure the manager wasn't watching. Then she did something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wallet. From it, she extracted $3 bills, money that clearly belonged to her personally. She placed it on the counter next to Harold's money and entered the transaction into the computer. "There," she said with satisfaction, "that covers everything. You'll get all three medications." Marcus stared at the money in disbelief. This young pharmacy technician, who probably made barely above minimum wage, had just given her own money to a complete stranger. She had no idea who he was, no expectation of being repaid, and no guarantee that anyone would ever know what she'd done. She did it simply because it was right, because a human being needed help. "I can't let you do that," Marcus said, his voice genuinely emotional now. "That's your money. You earned it." Sarah shook her head, her smile unwavering. "Mr. Thompson, I went into this profession to help people. What good is all my training if I can't make sure someone gets the medicine they need to stay alive? Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. When you get your check next week, if you can pay me back, great. If not, don't worry about it." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes, and they weren't part of his act. This young woman embodied everything he'd hoped his company would stand for. She'd risked her manager's disapproval, spent her own money, and invested her time, all for someone she perceived as having nothing to offer in return. In a world that often seemed dominated by greed and indifference, Sarah Martinez was a beacon of genuine compassion. He wanted to reveal himself right then, to tell her who he was, but he forced himself to remain patient. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, collecting the 3 prescription bags that Sarah handed him. "You don't know how much this means to me. You may have just saved my life." Sarah reached across the counter and gently patted his hand. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Thompson. Make sure you take these medications exactly as prescribed, and if you have any questions or problems, you come back and ask for me, okay? My name is Sarah. I work most weekdays." As Marcus turned to leave, he heard the manager calling Sarah over. His heart sank. Had his test just cost this incredible young woman her job? He pretended to shuffle slowly toward the door, but positioned himself where he could hear their conversation. "Sarah, I saw what you did," the manager said, his voice stern. "You paid for that customer's medication out of your own pocket. That's against company policy. You're not authorized to make those kinds of decisions." Sarah stood up straighter, meeting the manager's gaze directly. "I understand, sir, but that man needed medication to stay alive. I found every discount I could through proper channels, and I covered the tiny remaining amount myself. No company resources were misused. I did what I thought was right." Her voice didn't waver, even though Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She was scared, but standing her ground. The manager rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated. "You're a good technician, Sarah, but you can't save everyone. We have protocols for a reason. What happens when word gets out that you're paying for people's prescriptions? We'll have every person in the city coming here expecting handouts. This is a business, not a charity." His words were harsh, but Marcus detected a hint of weariness in his tone, as if he'd had this conversation before. "I'm not trying to save everyone," Sarah replied quietly. "I'm trying to help the people who come through my line when they need it most. That man had $53 to his name. I had $3 in my pocket. It wasn't a business decision, it was a human one. I'll accept whatever consequences you decide, but I won't apologize for helping someone stay alive." Her conviction was absolute, and Marcus had never been more certain that he'd found something rare and precious. The manager sighed deeply, looking between Sarah and the line of customers still waiting. "I'm writing this up, Sarah. It's going in your file. Corporate takes these things seriously, and I have to report policy violations. I don't want to, but I don't have a choice." Sarah nodded, accepting her fate with grace. "I understand, sir. I'll get back to work now." She returned to her station, and despite the reprimand she'd just received, her smile was still warm when she greeted the next customer. Marcus left the pharmacy with his heart racing and his mind reeling. He sat in his rental car for a long moment, staring at the prescription bags in his hands. Sarah Martinez had just done something extraordinary, something that reminded him why he'd started this company in the first place. But she was facing consequences for her compassion, and that knowledge filled him with a mixture of anger and determination. He needed to know more about this young woman before he revealed himself. Over the next 3 days, Marcus returned to Meadowbrook Pharmacy in his Harold Thompson disguise. He didn't interact with Sarah directly, but observed her from a distance. He watched how she treated every customer with the same kindness she'd shown him. When a mother with 3 children couldn't afford antibiotics for her sick daughter, Sarah spent 20 minutes finding assistance programs. When a confused elderly woman couldn't understand her medication instructions, Sarah drew diagrams and explained 3 times without showing any impatience. But Marcus also noticed the strain on Sarah's face. She often worked through her lunch breaks to help customers. Other staff members would take their full breaks, chatting and relaxing in the back room. But Sarah usually ate a quick sandwich while standing at her station, ready to help anyone who approached. She volunteered for extra shifts when colleagues called in sick. She stayed late to organize medication shelves and ensure everything was properly labeled and accessible. Marcus began talking to other customers, carefully maintaining his elderly persona. An older woman named Mrs. Patterson told him that Sarah had helped her navigate Medicare Part D enrollment during her own time, staying an extra hour after the pharmacy closed. A middle-aged man shared that Sarah had noticed a dangerous drug interaction in his prescriptions that could have killed him, something the prescribing doctors had missed. Story after story painted the same picture of someone who went far beyond her job description. He also learned about Sarah's background by carefully listening to conversations. She was a single mother, raising a 6-year-old daughter, alone. She worked full-time at the pharmacy while taking online courses to complete her pharmacist degree. Money was tight. She drove an old car that had seen better days and brought lunch from home to save money. Yet despite her own struggles, she'd given $3 to a stranger without hesitation. That detail haunted Marcus more than anything else. Marcus decided to dig deeper through official channels. He contacted his head of human resources and asked for Sarah Martinez's complete employee file, claiming he was reviewing staff for potential promotions. The file arrived the next day, and what he read both impressed and troubled him. Sarah had been with the company for 3 years. Her performance reviews were outstanding, with numerous customer commendations, but there were also multiple written warnings in her file. Each warning was for the same offense: unauthorized use of discount programs or spending too much time with individual customers. The manager had documented every instance where Sarah had gone off script to help someone. According to company metrics, she had the lowest transactions per hour rate of any technician in her district, but she also had the highest customer satisfaction scores and the most positive reviews. The disconnect between corporate values and actual practice had never been more clear to Marcus. One particular incident report stood out. 6 months earlier, Sarah had discovered that a diabetic teenager's insulin prescription wasn't being covered by his family's new insurance. Rather than turning them away, she'd spent 2 hours on the phone with the insurance company, fighting through bureaucracy until she got the coverage approved. The family had been incredibly grateful, writing a glowing letter to corporate headquarters. But Sarah had been written up for excessive time expenditure and failure to maintain efficiency standards. Marcus felt his anger building as he read through the file. His company had created a system that punished employees for showing compassion. Somewhere along the way, efficiency metrics and profit margins had become more important than the human beings the pharmacies were supposed to serve. Sarah was being penalized for embodying the exact values that Marcus had founded the company on. It was unacceptable, and he knew he had to do something about it. That evening, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his executive team. He didn't reveal his undercover operation yet, but he asked pointed questions about employee policies, performance metrics, and how customer service was actually measured in their pharmacies. The answers he received confirmed his worst fears. Bonuses for pharmacy managers were tied to efficiency metrics and profit margins. There were no rewards for compassion, no recognition for going the extra mile to help vulnerable customers. His chief financial officer proudly presented data showing how they'd cut costs by reducing average transaction times. His operations director showed charts demonstrating improved profit margins by strictly enforcing payment policies. But nowhere in any of their presentations was there mention of the human cost. Marcus listened quietly, taking notes, his jaw clenched. These executives thought they were doing exactly what he wanted, maximizing shareholder value and operational efficiency. They had no idea they'd lost the soul of the company. After the meeting ended, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights below. He thought about Sarah Martinez, probably at home right now, helping her daughter with homework, unaware that her job was in jeopardy for being too kind. He thought about all the other employees like her who might exist in his 200-plus locations. Good people trying to do right in a system that didn't value compassion. He thought about Harold Thompson and the thousands of real people like him who struggled every day to afford medication. Marcus made a decision that night. He would return to Meadowbrook Pharmacy one more time as Harold Thompson. He would see how Sarah's story continued to unfold, and then he would reveal himself, not just to Sarah, but to the entire company. Things were going to change, starting immediately. He didn't build a billion-dollar empire just to watch it become another soulless corporation that treated people as transactions. It was time to remember why Chen Pharmaceuticals existed in the first place. A week later, Marcus returned to Meadowbrook Pharmacy as Harold Thompson. This time he carried a small envelope in his pocket containing the $3 Sarah had given him, plus a handwritten thank you note. He wanted to return her money and express his gratitude before revealing his true identity. As he entered the pharmacy, he immediately noticed that something had changed. The atmosphere felt tense, and Sarah's usual brightness seemed dimmed. He joined the line at Sarah's register, observing her carefully. She still smiled at customers and provided thorough service, but there was a weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When it was finally his turn, she looked up and her face lit up with genuine joy. "Mr. Thompson, it's so good to see you again. How are you feeling? Are the medications working well for you?" Her concern was authentic, and Marcus felt a pang of guilt for the deception. "I'm doing much better, thanks to you," Marcus replied in his raspy Harold voice. "I came back to return something." He placed the envelope on the counter and pushed it toward her. "That's the $3 you gave me, plus a little note. I got my check this week, and I wanted to make sure you got your money back. What you did for me, Miss Sarah, I'll never forget it. You're an angel." Sarah opened the envelope and pulled out the money and the note. As she read the simple message thanking her for her kindness, her eyes grew misty. "Mr. Thompson, you didn't have to do this. I told you not to worry about it." She tried to hand the money back, but Marcus gently pushed her hand away. "I may be old and poor, but I pay my debts," he said firmly. "You helped me when I had nothing. That means everything." Before Sarah could respond, the pharmacy manager appeared beside her station. His expression was stern, and he held a clipboard with official-looking documents. "Sarah, I need to see you in the office," he said curtly. Sarah's face paled slightly, but she nodded. "Can I just finish helping this customer?" she asked. The manager glanced at Marcus, then back at Sarah. "Make it quick." He walked away toward the back office. Sarah turned back to Marcus, trying to maintain her composure, but he could see fear in her eyes. "Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, her voice slightly unsteady. Marcus's heart ached. He suspected what was about to happen, and he wanted to stop it, to reveal himself right then. But he needed to see how this played out. He needed to witness the full extent of how his company treated its best employees. "No, dear, you've done more than enough," Marcus said gently, "but I can see something's troubling you. Is everything all right?" Sarah hesitated, then gave him a brave smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll be fine, Mr. Thompson. You take care of yourself, okay? Keep taking those medications." She squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture of connection that transcended the pharmacist-patient relationship. Then she removed her work vest and walked toward the manager's office. Marcus stepped away from the counter but didn't leave the pharmacy. He positioned himself near a display of vitamins where he could see into the manager's glass-walled office. Through the window, he watched as Sarah sat down across from the manager. Another person was in the room. A woman in a business suit who Marcus didn't recognize, but who carried herself with the authority of someone from corporate headquarters. This wasn't a routine meeting. This was something serious. The conversation lasted about 15 minutes. Marcus couldn't hear what was being said, but he could read body language. The corporate woman did most of the talking, gesturing to documents on the desk. The manager sat with his arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. Sarah listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap, nodding occasionally. At one point, she said something that made the corporate woman shake her head firmly. Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly, but she maintained her dignity. Finally, Sarah stood up and shook hands with both the manager and the corporate woman. As she left the office, Marcus could see tears in her eyes, though she was clearly fighting to hold them back. She walked straight to the employee area, gathered her personal belongings from her locker, and put them in a small bag. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. They'd fired her. They'd terminated one of their best employees for the crime of caring too much. Sarah walked through the pharmacy toward the exit, her head held high, despite the tears now streaming down her face. As she passed Marcus, she didn't see him at first, focused on getting out before she broke down completely. But he stepped into her path gently and she stopped, recognition flickering across her face. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I have to go." "What happened?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I've been let go. Corporate decided that my pattern of policy violations and low efficiency metrics made me unsuitable for the position. They said I was a liability because I kept giving unauthorized discounts and spending company time inappropriately." She laughed bitterly. "I spent company time helping people stay alive. That's my crime." Marcus felt fury rising in his chest like a volcanic eruption. This was the final straw, the moment that crystallized everything wrong with what his company had become. Sarah Martinez, who embodied every value he'd ever believed in, was being discarded like trash because she'd chosen humanity over efficiency metrics. He couldn't let her walk out that door without knowing the truth. It was time to end the charade. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice dropping the raspy quality of Harold Thompson, "I need to tell you something very important, and I need you to listen carefully." Sarah looked at him, confused by the sudden change in his voice. She took a step back, uncertain. Marcus reached up and carefully removed the clouded contact lenses, revealing his sharp, clear eyes. Then he peeled away some of the prosthetic makeup from his face, revealing younger, smoother skin beneath. Sarah's eyes widened in shock as she watched the transformation. "What? Who are you?" she stammered, backing away further. Other customers were starting to notice the commotion. Marcus pulled out his wallet and showed her his real identification, his driver's license with his real name, and a business card that identified him as the founder and CEO of Chen Pharmaceuticals. Sarah stared at the cards, then at his face, then back at the cards. "My real name is Marcus Chen," he said quietly. "I own this company. I own all 200-plus pharmacies across the country. I came here in disguise because I needed to see what was really happening in my stores, how my employees were treating customers when they thought no one important was watching. And what I found was you, the best example of what I always hoped this company would be." Sarah's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then anger. You were testing me? This was all a setup?" Her voice rose, and other customers were definitely watching now. The pharmacy manager heard the disturbance and started walking toward them. Marcus held up his hand. "Yes, I was testing you, but not in the way you think. I wasn't trying to trap you or get you in trouble. I was looking for people who still remembered what healthcare is supposed to be about, and I found you." "Well, congratulations," Sarah said bitterly. "You found me, and now I don't have a job. Do you know what this means? I'm a single mother with a daughter to support. I'm in school trying to build a better life for us. I can't afford to be unemployed. And for what? Because I helped you when you pretended to be poor? Because I actually cared about what I thought was a real person in need?" Her hands were shaking, and Marcus could see she was fighting between tears and rage. The pharmacy manager arrived, looking between Sarah and the man he didn't recognize. "Is there a problem here? Sarah, I thought you were leaving." Then his eyes fell on the makeup prosthetics Marcus was still removing, and confusion crossed his face. What's going on? Marcus turned to face the manager, pulling the grey wig completely off and revealing his dark hair. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm the owner of this company, and we need to talk. The manager's face went white. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He looked like he might faint. Around them, pharmacy staff and customers were gathering, sensing that something significant was happening. The corporate woman from the office appeared, took one look at Marcus, and her professional composure cracked. Mr. Chen, sir, we had no idea you were... We didn't know. She trailed off, clearly panicking. Marcus ignored them both and turned back to Sarah. You asked what this means for you. Let me tell you. It means you're not fired. In fact, I'm personally intervening to remove every single write-up from your employee file. It means I'm promoting you to a position where you can actually use your compassion and skill without being punished for it. And it means I'm going to make sure that what happened to you never happens to another good employee again. Sarah shook her head, still processing everything. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Why the disguise and the test? Why not just look at employee records or customer reviews? Marcus sighed, his expression softening. Because numbers on a page don't tell me what someone's heart is made of. Reviews can be faked. Metrics can be manipulated, but character reveals itself when people think no one important is watching. You showed me yours, Sarah. You gave your own money to a stranger. You fought with your manager to help someone you'd never met before. You did all of that knowing it might cost you your job. The pharmacy manager found his voice. Mr. Chen, sir, I was just following company policy. The write-ups, the termination. It was all by the book. Corporate efficiency standards required. Marcus cut him off with a sharp gesture. The book is wrong. The policies are wrong. If our standards punish people for showing compassion, then our standards need to change. Sarah Martinez is exactly the kind of employee this company should be celebrating, not firing. And the fact that our system failed her so completely tells me we have a lot of work to do. He turned to address the growing crowd of staff and customers. I started Chen Pharmaceuticals 25 years ago with a simple mission: to make healthcare accessible and compassionate. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. We became focused on metrics and margins and forgot about the human beings we're supposed to serve. Today, that changes. Sarah showed me what we should be, and I'm going to make sure the entire company learns from her example. Sarah stood frozen, trying to process everything that had just happened. Her mind was racing. She'd lost her job, discovered her elderly patient was actually a billionaire in disguise, and now he was offering her a promotion. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie rather than her real life. I don't know what to say, she finally managed, her voice small. This is all so overwhelming. 10 minutes ago, I thought my career was over. Now you're telling me I'm being promoted. Marcus nodded, his expression sincere. I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm sorry for the deception. But I needed to see the truth, and you showed me something I desperately needed to find. Proof that there are still people in this company who care more about patients than profits. I want you to help me fix this broken system. Will you consider it? Sarah looked around at the faces watching them, her former co-workers, customers she'd helped, the manager who'd just fired her. Everything had turned upside down in an instant. What kind of position are you talking about? Sarah asked cautiously. Marcus could see she was still processing, still uncertain whether to trust this strange turn of events. I want you to be our director of patient advocacy, he explained. It's a new role I'm creating right now. You'll work directly with me to redesign our customer service policies, train staff on compassionate care, and make sure that what happened to you never happens to another employee who's trying to do the right thing. You'll have the authority to implement real change. Sarah's eyes widened. Director? But I'm not even a licensed pharmacist yet. I'm still in school. I don't have the qualifications for a position like that. Marcus shook his head firmly. You have the most important qualification. You understand that our customers are human beings, not transactions. We can provide additional training, education support, whatever you need. What I can't teach is the heart you showed when you helped Harold Thompson. That's something people either have or they don't. You have it. The corporate woman who'd participated in Sarah's termination stepped forward nervously. Mr. Chen, sir, if I may, there are protocols for senior positions. Background checks, interviews, board approval. We can't just create a director-level role on the spot. Marcus turned to her, his expression hardening. I'm the founder and majority shareholder. I absolutely can create any position I want. And frankly, the protocols you're so concerned about are part of the problem. They prioritize credentials over character. Sarah has proven her character. We'll handle the formalities. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call right there in the pharmacy. Janet, it's Marcus Chen. I need you to draft an employment contract immediately. Director of Patient Advocacy, reporting directly to me. Salary at $95,000 annually, full benefits, education assistance for pharmacy school completion, and a signing bonus of $10,000. Email it to me within the hour. He paused, listening. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, I have the authority. Just do it. He ended the call and looked back at Sarah. The salary is non-negotiable, by the way. It's what the position deserves. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face again, but these were different tears, tears of shock, relief, and overwhelming gratitude. $95,000. That's more than triple what I was making. I can't. This is too much. Marcus smiled warmly. It's not too much. It's what someone with your dedication and compassion should have been earning all along. You were underpaid and undervalued. That ends today. Plus, the company will cover the rest of your pharmacy school expenses. When you get your license, we'll discuss another promotion. The pharmacy manager stood awkwardly to the side, clearly unsure of his own standing now. Marcus noticed him and addressed him directly. As for you, I want a full report on every employee in this location. I want to know who else has been written up for helping customers, who else has gone above and beyond only to be punished for it. Those write-ups are being removed, and those employees are getting bonuses. Is that clear? The manager nodded rapidly. Yes, sir, absolutely, sir. I'll have it to you by tomorrow morning. Marcus wasn't finished. He raised his voice so everyone in the pharmacy could hear him clearly. I'm also announcing a new company-wide policy, effective immediately. Any employee who uses their own money to help a customer in need will be reimbursed double the amount. Any employee who takes extra time to find assistance programs or solutions for patients will be recognized and rewarded, not punished. Efficiency metrics will no longer be the primary measure of performance. Compassion and patient outcomes will be weighted equally. This is not optional. This is the new standard. A spontaneous round of applause broke out among the customers and staff. Several employees were crying, and Marcus could see relief on their faces. How many of them had been living in fear of write-ups for caring too much? How many had felt the same conflict Sarah had, wanting to help but being constrained by heartless policies? Marcus felt ashamed that it had come to this, that he'd let his company drift so far from its founding principles, but he was determined to make it right. Sarah wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, composing herself. Mr. Chen, I accept your offer, but I have one condition. Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Name it. Sarah gestured to the pharmacy around them. I want to keep working here part-time while I fulfill my director duties. These customers, this community, they're why I do this job. I don't want to lose touch with the front lines. If I'm going to help redesign policies, I need to stay connected to what actually happens behind that counter every day. Marcus felt a surge of respect. Even in this moment of personal triumph, Sarah was thinking about the people she served. Done, he said without hesitation. You'll work 3 days a week here at Meadowbrook and 2 days at corporate headquarters. We'll arrange your schedule so you can still attend your classes. And Sarah, she looked at him, still dazed by everything. Thank you for reminding me why I started this company. You saved more than Harold Thompson's life that day. You might have saved this entire company's soul. News of what happened at Meadowbrook Pharmacy spread through Chen Pharmaceuticals like wildfire. Within hours, employees at locations across the country were hearing the story of Sarah Martinez and the billionaire's disguise. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Pharmacy technicians and pharmacists who'd felt constrained by harsh policies suddenly saw hope for change. But not everyone was happy. Some corporate executives saw Marcus's impulsive decisions as a threat to the business model they'd carefully constructed. 2 days after the incident, Marcus called an emergency board meeting at company headquarters. The boardroom was tense as executives and board members filed in, uncertain what to expect. Marcus stood at the head of the table, and beside him sat Sarah Martinez, looking slightly uncomfortable in new professional attire, but carrying herself with quiet dignity. Several board members exchanged confused glances. Who was this young woman, and why was she sitting in a position usually reserved for senior leadership? Marcus began without preamble. I'm sure you've all heard about what happened at our Meadowbrook location. For those who haven't received the full story, let me clarify. He proceeded to tell them everything. His disguise as Harold Thompson, Sarah's compassionate response, her termination for policy violations, and his decision to promote her and reform company policies. The room remained silent throughout his explanation, but Marcus could read the reactions on various faces. Some showed admiration, others concern, and a few displayed barely concealed anger. When he finished, the chief financial officer spoke up. Marcus, with all due respect, what you did was incredibly risky. You created a director-level position without board approval, promised company-wide policy changes that will affect our bottom line, and essentially told employees it's okay to disregard efficiency metrics. Our shareholders expect consistent returns. These decisions could jeopardize profitability. Other executives nodded in agreement, and Marcus could feel the resistance building in the room. Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but steely. Let me be very clear about something. I founded this company with a mission to provide accessible, compassionate healthcare. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that mission in pursuit of quarterly earnings and efficiency metrics. Sarah Martinez showed me what we've become, a company that fires its best employees for caring too much. If our business model depends on punishing compassion, then our business model is fundamentally broken and needs to change. The chief operations officer interjected, her tone diplomatic but firm. No one is arguing against compassion, Marcus, but we operate in a competitive market with razor-thin margins. Every minute a technician spends on one customer is a minute they're not serving another. Every unauthorized discount affects our pricing agreements with manufacturers and insurers. There are real business consequences to what you're proposing. We can't just ignore economic reality because of one emotional incident. Sarah had been sitting quietly, but now she spoke up, her voice steady despite her nervousness. May I say something? All eyes turned to her. Marcus nodded encouragingly. Sarah took a breath and continued. I understand your concerns about efficiency and profitability, but I think you're missing something important. When I helped Mr. Thompson, or who I thought was Mr. Thompson, I wasn't just being nice. I was preventing a health crisis that would have cost the system far more money down the road. She had their attention now. Sarah continued, gaining confidence. If that elderly man couldn't afford his heart medication and insulin, what happens? He ends up in the emergency room with a cardiac event or diabetic crisis. The hospital bills run into tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Medicare pays those bills, and insurance premiums go up for everyone. By spending 15 minutes and $3 to prevent that cascade, I actually saved money, just not money that shows up on our pharmacy's quarterly report. Real healthcare economics is more complicated than transaction speed. Several board members leaned back, considering this perspective. Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest. Sarah understood the bigger picture in a way that many of his executives didn't. The head of marketing spoke up. She makes a valid point. And there's another factor we're not discussing, Brand reputation. This story has already gone viral on social media. Customers are praising Chen Pharmaceuticals for standing behind compassion. Our favorability ratings have increased 23% in just 2 days. That kind of positive publicity is worth millions in marketing value. The tide in the room was beginning to shift. Marcus pressed his advantage. I'm not proposing we abandon sound business practices. I'm proposing we expand our definition of success beyond the narrowest metrics. Yes, we need to be profitable to survive, but we also need to remember that our customers are human beings with real struggles, not just data points in a spreadsheet. Companies that forget that don't just lose money eventually, they lose their reason for existing. Marcus pulled up a presentation on the large screen. I've spent the last 2 days analyzing employee data across all our locations. Do you know what I found? The pharmacy technicians with the most customer complaints and the highest error rates are the ones who process transactions the fastest. Meanwhile, technicians like Sarah, who take time with customers, have virtually no complaints and catch medication errors that could have been fatal. Speed isn't everything. In healthcare, careful attention can literally save lives. He clicked to another slide showing customer retention data. Here's something else interesting. Customers who report feeling cared for by our staff are 65% more likely to use our pharmacies exclusively and recommend us to others. Customer loyalty, real, lasting loyalty, doesn't come from fast transactions. It comes from feeling valued and understood. Sarah created more long-term business value in 15 minutes with one customer than a month of rushed transactions could ever generate. That's the model we should be replicating, not punishing. Marcus advanced to the next slide, showing his proposal for reformed company policies. Here's what I'm implementing, effective immediately across all Chen Pharmaceuticals locations. First, we're revising performance metrics. Transaction speed will now count for only 25% of employee evaluations. Customer satisfaction, medication counseling quality, and problem solving will comprise the other 75%. Employees will be rewarded for taking time to help patients, not penalized for it, he continued. Second, we're creating a patient assistance fund, $10 million annually, to help customers who can't afford their medications. Pharmacy staff will have the authority to access this fund for qualifying cases without requiring multiple levels of approval. We're also hiring dedicated patient advocates at every location to help customers navigate insurance issues, find discount programs, and apply for manufacturer assistance. These advocates will report to Sarah's department. The CFO looked pained. Marcus, $10 million is a significant expense. Our shareholders will question this allocation. Marcus met his gaze directly. Then we'll explain it to them. And if they can't understand why a healthcare company should help people access healthcare, perhaps they shouldn't be shareholders in this company. I'd rather lose investors who don't share our values than lose sight of our mission. Besides, as Sarah pointed out, preventing health crises is more cost-effective than treating them after the fact. Marcus clicked to another slide. Third, we're launching a comprehensive retraining program for all pharmacy staff. The focus will be on empathetic customer service, identifying patients in need, and using creative problem-solving to find solutions. Sarah will lead the development of this training curriculum, drawing on her experience. We're also revising our employee handbook to explicitly state that compassionate care takes precedence over rigid policy adherence when patient health is at stake, Sarah added to his presentation. I've also been working on a proposal for a company-wide recognition program. Every month, we'll identify employees who go above and beyond to help patients. These employees will receive bonuses, public recognition, and opportunities for advancement. We want to create a culture where caring for patients is celebrated as the path to success, not an obstacle to it. The heroes of our company should be people who make a difference in patients' lives. The board members were starting to nod. The initial resistance was giving way to cautious acceptance. The head of human resources spoke up. I actually think this could help with our retention problems. We lose a lot of good people who say they feel conflicted between company policies and their desire to help patients. If we create an environment where compassion is valued, we might keep more quality employees like Sarah. The cost of recruitment and training is substantial. Better retention could offset some of these new expenses. Marcus smiled, sensing he was winning them over. Exactly. And there's one more element to this plan. We're launching a transparency initiative. Every quarter, we'll publish a report showing how many patients we've helped through our assistance programs, what health outcomes we've improved, and how our employees are making a difference in communities. We're going to tell the stories of people like Sarah and the customers she helps. This isn't just about policy changes. It's about changing our company culture from the inside out. The chief marketing officer was taking furious notes. This is gold from a branding perspective. In an era where consumers are increasingly skeptical of corporations, showing genuine commitment to community welfare could differentiate us significantly from competitors. We could build entire campaigns around real stories from our pharmacies. The authenticity would be powerful. Marcus nodded. But we're not doing this primarily for marketing. We're doing it because it's right. The marketing benefits are a happy consequence, not the goal. Over the next hour, the board discussed implementation details, budget allocations, and potential challenges. Not everyone was completely convinced, but Marcus's passion and Sarah's practical insights were persuasive. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to approve Marcus's initiatives on a trial basis, with quarterly reviews to assess impact on both patient outcomes and company performance. It wasn't unanimous support, but it was enough to move forward. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, several approached Sarah to introduce themselves and express admiration for her dedication. The chief medical officer, a former pharmacist herself, shook Sarah's hand warmly. "What you did took courage. I'm glad Marcus found you. This company needs more people who remember that we're in the business of healing, not just selling." Sarah thanked her, still somewhat overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. When the room finally cleared, Marcus and Sarah stood alone by the window overlooking the city. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked. Sarah laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. "I'm not sure. A week ago I was a pharmacy technician worried about making rent. Now I'm a director helping to reshape company policy for $1 billion corporation. It doesn't feel real." Marcus smiled. "It's real. And you're going to be amazing at it because you understand what really matters." Sarah turned to face him directly. "Why did you really do it? The disguise, I mean. You could have reviewed files, visited stores as yourself, talked to customers. Why go to such elaborate lengths?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because I needed to see the truth without the performance people put on when the boss is watching. I needed to experience what my most vulnerable customers experience every day, and I needed to find out if anyone still cared. You gave me hope, Sarah. You showed me that the values I founded this company on aren't dead. They just need to be nurtured and celebrated instead of suppressed." 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of a room full of pharmacy employees from across the Chen Pharmaceuticals network. She was presenting the new training program she'd developed, sharing stories from her experience and teaching others how to identify patients in need and connect them with resources. The room was engaged, asking questions and sharing their own stories of times they'd wanted to help but felt constrained by policies. The atmosphere was energized, hopeful in a way that had been missing before. Marcus watched from the back of the room, observing Sarah's natural leadership abilities. She'd taken to her new role with remarkable skill, balancing compassion with practical business sense. The patient assistance fund she'd helped implement had already served over 2,000 customers who might otherwise have gone without necessary medications. Early data showed that pharmacies implementing the new policies were seeing increased customer loyalty and improved health outcomes, with no significant negative impact on profitability. Not everything had gone smoothly. Some employees struggled to adapt to the new expectations, preferring the old system where following rules was simpler than making judgment calls. A few managers had resigned rather than embrace the cultural shift, and there were still board members who questioned whether compassion-focused policies were sustainable long-term. But the overall trend was positive, and Marcus was cautiously optimistic that real change was taking root in his company. The story of Marcus's disguise and Sarah's promotion had become legendary within Chen Pharmaceuticals and beyond. Media outlets had covered it extensively, and the company's reputation had improved dramatically. Customers specifically sought out Chen pharmacies because they'd heard about the company's renewed commitment to patient care. Recruiting had become easier as well. Pharmacy school graduates wanted to work for a company that valued compassion. The business case for doing good was proving itself day by day. Sarah finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause. During the break, several employees approached her with questions and stories. A pharmacist from Oregon told her about using the Patient Assistance Fund to help a veteran afford his medications. A technician from Texas shared how she'd spent an hour helping an elderly customer organize their multiple prescriptions into a safer system. These were exactly the stories Marcus had hoped to hear, evidence that the culture was truly changing. That evening, Marcus invited Sarah to dinner to celebrate the successful training session. Over the meal, they discussed the progress they'd made and the challenges still ahead. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, "about expanding the program. What if we partnered with medical schools and nursing programs to teach compassionate care from the beginning? We could create internships and scholarships for students who demonstrate both competence and empathy. Build the next generation of healthcare providers with the right values from the start." Marcus was impressed. "That's an excellent idea. Draft a proposal and let's present it to the board next month." "You're thinking strategically now, Sarah. You're not just responding to problems, you're anticipating them and creating systemic solutions." Sarah blushed slightly at the praise. "I learned from watching you. You didn't just give me money or change a policy. You transformed an entire system because you understood that isolated fixes wouldn't address the root problem. I'm trying to apply that same thinking." They talked about Sarah's daughter, who was thriving now that her mother's financial stress had eased. They discussed Sarah's progress in pharmacy school, where she was excelling with the support of company-provided tutoring and flexible scheduling. They reflected on how one encounter, one test of character, had set in motion changes that were affecting thousands of people. It was a reminder that individual actions mattered, that one person's decision to do the right thing could ripple outward in unexpected ways. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah turned to Marcus with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something I've been wondering about. What if I'd failed your test? What if I'd turned Harold Thompson away without helping? Would you have revealed yourself? Would you have done anything?" It was a question Marcus had asked himself many times. He considered it carefully before answering. "Honestly, I don't know," Marcus admitted. "If you'd turned me away, I probably would have visited more locations, looking for someone who passed. And if I hadn't found anyone, I would have been forced to confront the fact that my company had completely lost its way. I like to think I would still have made changes, but maybe not as dramatic ones. You gave me a hero to rally around, Sarah. You gave me proof that good people still existed in the system. That made it easier to fight for change, because I wasn't fighting for an abstract principle. I was fighting for people like you." Sarah nodded slowly. "So, in a way, we saved each other. I saved Harold Thompson, and you saved my career and gave me a platform to make a real difference. It's strange how things work out." Marcus smiled. "Not strange, purposeful. I think we cross paths with certain people at certain times for reasons we don't always understand immediately. You were in that pharmacy for a reason. I was there in disguise for a reason, and now we're here together, changing lives for a reason. Sometimes the universe aligns things perfectly." 6 months after that fateful day at Meadowbrook Pharmacy, Chen Pharmaceuticals was recognized as the most customer-friendly pharmacy chain in the nation. Employee satisfaction scores had increased by 40%. Customer retention was at an all-time high. And most importantly, thousands of patients who might have struggled to afford medications were getting the help they needed. The company had proven that profitability and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. They were complementary when approached correctly. Sarah completed her pharmacy degree and was promoted again, this time to Vice President of Patient Care. She continued to work part-time at Meadowbrook Pharmacy, maintaining her connection to the front lines that had shaped her approach. Marcus stepped back from day-to-day operations somewhat, confident that the company was finally aligned with his original vision. He'd learned that success wasn't measured only in dollars, but in lives touched, dignity preserved, and kindness extended when it mattered most. And sometimes, late at night when the office was quiet, Marcus would think back to that moment when Harold Thompson stood at Sarah's counter with $53 and a desperate need. He would remember the fear in his own heart that his company had lost its soul, and the overwhelming relief when Sarah proved him wrong. It had been a test, yes, but not just of her character, of his own commitment to his values. They'd both passed, and the world was better for it.